I'm Peter Gluck. Just to be, and I designed the building, so I guess that's what we're here for. I actually went to Scarsdale High School, class of 1957. So this was one of my earlier projects. I've been working since then. So how many years is it I started? I graduated from architecture school in 65. In 65, so how many years have I been doing this? As you know, this was the result of a competition. There were 4 or 5 architects who entered the competition and were asked to enter the competition, and we won. So this is the result of that competition, which was really good because the selection was based on the quality of the design, and the design was very complicated because, as you know, the sanctuary was on the level above. So where we're sitting now was the Sunday school. So when the building burned down, rather than replace it, the floor across there, I figured that the only way to get a more elevated space was to eliminate that floor and put the Sunday school somewhere else. So the Sunday school has been redesigned and placed in the back where you all know where it is. But that allowed us to keep a 1-story building on the street, which is important to the people interested in the quality of architecture on the street. They didn't want a large building. So you see a 1-story building on the street, but what you get here, you see the loft of the, I don't know what the height is here, it must be 40 feet or something. So that was the initial move. It also gave us 2 entrances, which I guess is important on a busy day. People come in from the top, as you know, or from this floor. So that was the first move that I think made a lot of sense. Then, well, maybe I should let me ask first before I start talking too much. I'm really interested in what your questions are, and what I should sort of focus on. I will talk a little bit about architecture because that's obviously my passion, and I'll try to explain architecturally what this building is all about. So anybody have any questions or, yeah? It was completely open. It was a competition. Just, here we have this pile of burned out building. What would you do with it? It was as simple as that. But actually the competition, I think, lasted probably 2 or 3 months. And it was a lot of work to prepare for the competition. And of course, the problem with competitions is that you have a small chance of winning, but it's great when you win, and it really is not so good when you don't. But that's life. The little guys. Yeah, the little guys. The traditional design of a Christian church has a transept, a crossing. So this is basically a cross in plan, but this was a more modern building. This is a postmodern building, but the modern aspect of it would keep it from being completely traditional. But that's like an allusion to the that crosses that makes the cross. It's very subtle, and probably no one would ever know that. Nonetheless, that's the purpose for it. And if you look outside, you'll see that the shape of it comes from the geometry of what happens on the outside, with the triangle piece on the front that has all the stone. Well, why don't I leap into that whole dialogue about postmodernism and modernism? This is really a postmodern building, meaning it has 2 readings. It's a modern building, and yet it's not a modern building. It has elements that are more traditional. So this is very, relative to the work I would do normally, this is very traditional. But at the same time, there are aspects to it that are very modern. For example, every plane is independent from the other. So it's obvious. It's clearly saying this is thin. This is made to look like something else. It's the shapes are not coming from their construction. They're coming from some other idea. The other idea being tradition. So you see, there's a reveal between every plane. So the roof plane is very pure, and it stops, doesn't touch the wall. So does that make? I'd love to say that was planned. I would love to say that was planned. Yeah. Yes, we designed the organ. It's a Walker organ, tracker organ, meaning that there's a physical connection between the keys and the pipes. So when you push a key, there's a sliding long piece of wood which goes over and operates the pipes. There's no electronic connection between the pipes and the keyboard. The design of it was really difficult because the church is really focused not on a cross, but it's focused on the organ. So again, to us, that was a question of how do you design the organ face without it being specifically a religious design. So it was in between. We designed it though. It was completely. I have pictures of it being built. It's like a building. It's an amazing piece of equipment. This organ. There's nothing quite like it. And the space has been looked at when we designed it with an acoustician. So a lot of the things in here come to make the sound better. So that's the kind of modernist thing that we use in our daily lives. No one would want to go back to building traditionally. So then, what does it look like, and how do you evoke your question? How do you evoke the original or the tradition of the stone church in a kind of a rural or suburban situation? So everything is built traditionally, except for this one piece, the triangle outside, which I call the literal fragment. So that's a fragment that's been made up of our sort of study of this particular kind of architecture, Norman architecture, and that's the only place where there's any stone in the new building. So every place that you see stone, it's because it survived the fire, except for this one spot where we made something that people could relate to. And after we were finished, there were some people that came up to me and said, "Oh, they loved the building because it's exactly the way it was, and you rebuilt it exactly the way." And I said, "Oh, yeah, that's great." And there's nothing at all like the old building, except that there are these kind of very simple impressions that people have. So, and as I say, this is a building that's meant to have two readings. One, the reading of its being an old building, always having been here. And the other reading is that it's fresh and new and a different take on what happens here. So, no, I did not do the stained glass windows. That was done. There was a committee, as you can imagine, there was a committee, because I remember something like 16 committees, I think. I think we must have met in committees like well over 100 times during this process. But I mean, you see the depth, how to make depth without actually doing it with stone. And the stone fragment is actually very thin, but it's very well composed. I mean, we designed every piece, every stone on that triangle. It took a long time. I know you worked on the stained glass for a long time, trying to find the right design, and I think it's very successful. It's not, in a way, it's the same idea as the building is. It's not traditional. It doesn't tell a religious theme. which would be more traditional. It just plays with light and lets you imagine. Modern architecture is demanding in that you have to make your own interpretation of it. It doesn't tell you specifically how to feel or where to go or what to do. Its idea is to give you as many experiences as you possibly can. That's why a lot of it is white. So this is all white. There's only one color here, or two colors. There's the wood and there's white. And that allows you to see the change in the weather, the change in the day. It's different now than it was when we first came in. And although you're not aware of that, it's really critical to your overall feeling of what it's like to be here. You may not feel that in your living room, but you might feel it in a room like this. This is terrazzo. So terrazzo is originally an Italian material where a cement matrix with marble chips put in it. And then it's ground to be smooth. It was just the deep, dark colors just made sense with the space and the white walls. It didn't want any reflectivity from the floor. Wanted it to be quiet. Yes, really critical. There's so many churches. We spend a lot of time in Europe looking at buildings, and there's so many churches that are really hard. They're impressive. They represent 100 years of the net worth of a community, but they're very hard. Most of them are very hard to relate to. This was meant to be a place you could relate to. Not be overwhelming.
There you are.
Great. So the speaker systems are delayed in such a way that as you get further back, it understands the fact that sound takes a certain amount of time. So what you're hearing in the first row, you hear before you hear what you in the last row. So what happens in those light fixtures is that's mediated. That's made. They delay the front to have it work with the back. That way you eliminate echoes. Yeah, no, I'm pretty tough. I mean, if someone can out argue me, then they win. But there are reasons for everything. So if there's a strong enough dialogue, it all comes together. But it takes time. It takes a lot of time, because I do this every day, and I've been doing it for a while, and you guys don't do this every day. So when you're faced with a new project like this, everything is baffling and new, and it's a very difficult process. That's why most people want something they can see. So most churches, a group would say, well, show me a church that you've done. And so I want to go see that church because I want to kick the tire, like buying a car, I want to kick the tires. I don't want to get involved in a process at the end of which will become the result of the many discussions and dialogues that have been had. So those are the kinds of clients we have to have, because there's no tire to kick in the projects that we do. Should I just go through some slides? Okay. So this is, I don't know, this is the newspaper article. When is it from? Yeah, it shows the fire. Everything was down except the stone. All the stone you see out in here, the entrance, that all was original. The only stone that came from the new design was this triangle, the literal fragment out here. So everything else is standard, modern, metal stud and wood construction and drywall. So some of these pictures, I don't know whether you've seen these, but I think that's the new steel in place. But you can see where the floor was from the original building. It was a pretty frightening and sad aspect. This is what the old church looked like, and it was extremely low. They tell me I was never in it really, but it was just a one-story space, and the entrance was up there. Now, the nice thing is that we created two entrances, one here and one up there, which probably helps a lot on a busy day. So this is the drawing that shows the relationship between the two. So it's from this to this. That's the old building. That's the stone that the new entrance down there, which used to be the entrance to the school. All that stone. Now these are precedent images. So these are real Norman Gothic, or actually Romanesque churches. So you can see the element of the gable end, which is the triangle, is critical. And I have a couple more here. You see the strength and heaviness of all the stone, and how dark the ceiling is. Just to give you an idea where the original impulse for these churches came from. Now this is the other way to go. So this is Ronchamp by Le Corbusier in France. There are some, if you look at this, which is a really famous and fantastic church, and you can see here the references in the poked deep, the depth of the wall and the way the light comes through the wall is definitely one of the references for what happens here. This is another church by Saarinen at MIT. And again, light and dark are really critical. This is a completely modern and there are many unsuccessful modern churches, and there are many unsuccessful traditional sort of churches. I must say that the postmodern movement has died. There's so many really bad, terrible buildings that come from that, because it's so easy to take an element and glue it on the face. For example, the what I call the literal fragment. If that was badly done, it would really look tacky. It would look like a restaurant or something, a ye olde restaurant. But it's so demanding to do this kind of work that originally people thought it was easier to do it, and people could respond to it quicker. That's why there are so many prescriptions against modern buildings, because so many modern buildings are bad. When a traditional building is bad, it's at least it has some sort of a mnemonic reference, buildings that you knew, you have some relationship to it. But from my point of view, and ultimately historically, a bad postmodern building is just as bad as a bad modern building. The problem is that it's harder to make a good modern building. It's very hard. But when they're good, they're fantastic. This is an Alvar Aalto building in Italy, and light. Different ways of introducing light. This is a purely modern way. And this is kind of this is the drawing of your church, showing the relationship between stone and planar aspects. It's kind of a conceptual drawing of the building. This is the little fragment, and you can see that it was composed very, very precisely. As I say, every stone that's there, we actually drew, so that when they made it, they had a plan for the facade, just as if it were a plan. You're familiar with this? You can see how the roof is shown as a plane, and the gable end at both sides is shown as a plane, and there's that separation between them. There's no wall that doesn't have a separation between the two of them. It makes the whole building lighter, and it says, "I'm built in a certain way. I'm not built traditionally with stone." There you can see the separation between the roof plane and the rear wall. So this is what happens. There's the little window there, which is that window. That's what forms it. And there is the transept. Whether people know it or not, it's there. And that's what completes the traditional plan of a church. This was building gives you an idea what this monster is like. Now, this was all put together in England. We went to England and to understand how what does what and how it works. It's an amazing machine. And at the same time, we designed the facade. Here it is being assembled in the church. I was looking at the wood today. It's this beautiful English oak, which is a dark brown oak, and it's all solid. It's really fantastic. Nobody builds anything this way anymore. The pipes, they create all the notes. Let me see how to answer that. We went and we spent quite a bit of time in England with them, learning about how this thing works and how to transform the way it looks on the outside from the way it actually operates on the inside. It's an incredibly complex machine. So they were not upset about it, because in fact, as we got to work together, they liked it a lot better. I think that they were very happy with the way it turned out, and it was great for us. It's an amazing machine. Yeah, and actually the way it actually works, the way a tracker organ works is amazing. There's a direct connection from the keys to the pipes with kind of sliding pieces of wood. There's no electronic connection. There's no metal connection. It's miraculous. The only thing that's electronic here is the air, the bellows. The only difference between this organ and one that might have been built 200 years ago is that in the old days they would have had some kids pumping the air, and here there's just a fan. Yes, the space between two materials or two planes not touching is called a reveal, and the indentations which you see around are a representation of moldings. Moldings are usually put on the outside of a wall, and these they represent a molding, but they do the reverse. They go in. The purpose of a molding is to cover bad workmanship. So this kind of making a molding like this, an inverted molding like this, is much harder to do than it is to slap a piece of wood on two pieces that come together badly. But for some reason, people think that moldings create quality, but they don't. Anyway, this is a play of that sort of thing. Everything we do, to a certain degree, is play. Like, in a way, this building is very playful. It's playing with all of the elements that we see every day, that we don't really understand the derivation of them or what they're for. So if you start looking at things, you start seeing things in a different No, they were incredibly, the committees they were great. They were all really interested and really wanted to do the right thing and wanted to understand, all of which takes time. God, it took time. But I think it was worth it in the end. I think there are many good architects than there are good clients. And you're not going to find a good building if the client isn't good, if the client isn't willing to get involved in this kind of a dialogue and this kind of a learning process. I mean, every project for us is a learning process, and yet our clients sometimes think that, or clients, not our clients, but some clients tend to think, we don't need to go through that, we just want it done. I mean, it's part of the kind of commoditization of buildings. People will move into a house, and if the first thing they're concerned about is how much they can resell it for. So they're basically living in a bank account instead of living in a house. You don't. Not many people talk about architecture nearly enough, and the problem for us as architects is that if you went to university and have a degree, if they gave you 3 books, you'd be able to tell the difference between a really crummy, down and dirty book, a good read, and literature. You'd be able to tell the difference. But the same educated person, if I was to show you 3 buildings, they would not make the same. Their score would be way lower than because we're taught about reading, we're taught about literature, but we're not taught about anything visual. The parents think the kids, when they're kindergarten and 2nd grade and 3rd grade, they think, oh, that's so cute, that's so creative. And then they say, now he's in 4th grade, what the hell with that stuff, let's talk about math. It's really a shame, but that's the way it is. There's just so little understanding or appreciation of architecture, of the environment that we live in. That's why I'm so happy that you guys are really interested in this. You make me really happy.